The news of the day, though, is on the offensive side of the ball with a staffing change that I don't believe anybody saw coming. And that is that wide receivers coach, Chad Bumphis, is no longer going to be with the program moving forward. I think rumors started coming out, I think, early afternoon or maybe around lunchtime. Started to see some people suggest a few things and then get the reporting from the Genes Page guys. They put out the report officially that Chad Bumphis' tenure as Mississippi State's wide receivers coach is coming to an end. Don't know if he's going to coach the bowl game, how that's going to work out, but his run is over after 3 seasons in Starkville. Obviously, former Bulldog receiver, played under Dan Mullen, was a key piece in turning around the program under Mullen. Signed with Mullen as a freshman, as a 4-star out of Tupelo. Has an outstanding career. Ended his career as this program's all-time leading receiver, which he's second in that now. Still the leader in all-time receiving touchdowns. An all-time great Bulldog, a guy that was a fan favorite, and a guy that loves Mississippi State and was having success working up the coaching ranks as a wide receiver coach. Had the opportunity to bring him in 2022, and Mike Leach chose to go another direction. But then in 2023, Arnett goes and brings him in as receivers coach. Lebby ultimately retains him for the past couple of seasons, and we're getting was a defensive quality. Hold on, who was the defensive quality control coach at Oak State? Was that Bumphis? I don't think we got him from Utah, if I remember correctly. But regardless, God, Oliver, you messing with me there. I was getting into it, but anyway, you had the opportunity to bring him in. You chose not to. Comes on at 23. Lebby keeps him on staff, and look, it felt like it made a lot of sense, right? It's a guy who is a Bulldog, who is from the state of Mississippi, who's going to be able to recruit well in the state, going to be able to get some of the wide receiver talent that State's not been able to get previously and get them to come to Starkville. It was a move that felt like it made a whole lot of sense. And through 2 seasons, State's receivers were the strengths of the team. That 2024 offense I've talked about a lot, that offense only did anything because of the receivers. And yeah, Kevin Coleman was a big part of that, but Craver was very good when he was engaged and available. Kelly Akari, I think as the season went along, got better and better. I thought Jordan Mosley made some plays that season. And when State's receivers were kind of what made the offense tick. And then this year, you lose pretty much all of those guys. And you have Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans thrive. And you still have the receivers be the strength of what you're doing offensively. I thought the incoming receiving recruiting class for receivers was strong. So it was, nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody thought this was the move that was going to happen. And obviously people are pretty upset about that for some obvious reasons. If there was an offensive staffer that was going to go, you didn't think it was going to be Bump. There was talk that, Holisek, the quarterback coach, may no longer be with the program. It could be may have an opportunity to go be a G5 OC somewhere, but his name had come up as someone that might move on. Anthony Tucker was talked about as an option for Auburn, that he may go join Alex Golish's staff as a running backs coach there. Nobody thought Lodeholt would be fired, but again, with how the O-line performed, is it possible that Lebby would make another move at O-line coach? Like, if you were going to do it just based off which unit was struggling on offense, you could see that move happening. John Cooper at tight ends, that's Levy's guy, but the tight end position's kind of been underwhelming through a couple of years. So the position that's been the strongest has been receiver, and because of that, nobody anticipated that would be the position that you'd be making a change. But here we are. And I've been wondering, like, why was this the case? Like, why would they make this move? And like the first thing that kind of came to my head was, okay, well, is it possible he's making this decision because he wants to get one of his guys in there? That, hey, I run a very specific system. We have a very specific style of receiver we're looking for. We have specific ways that we're teaching them from a technique standpoint and the style of routes that they're running. Do I need to have one of my guys in there? And, I put that out on social media, which it's kind of funny. Bumphis liked that tweet. So I don't know if that was him saying, you don't know what you're talking about, or just kind of a whatever, but hey, it is what it is. But Then I went and looked at the guys Lebby has worked with as receivers coaches. And when he was at UCF, it was not a guy who had ties to that system. When he was at Oklahoma, not guys who had ties to that system. Even when Ole Miss, Derek Nix was the receivers coach there, and he had been on staff in Oxford for several years as a running backs coach at that point. Derek Nix had never been in that system and, was coaching the position fine. So clearly it's not a case of he thinks he has to have a guy who has been in his system or has done it. Like, he clearly is just looking for whoever he thinks is best suited for that role. Which typically means if you're not going after someone who knows your system or your style of coaching, that typically means you're getting someone who, okay, from a recruiting standpoint, are they going to be able to get the talent? And that's kind of the question with Bump. And I have thought of him as a good recruiter. I think a lot of fans have, because State's gone out and gotten some good players. And there's been some misses along the way, but I do wonder, should we put a lot of those misses on him? Is it J.J. Harrell not panning out? Is that a Bumphis misevaluation? Stonka in that whole situation where he clearly wants to be a receiver. State thinks he probably is best suited as a safety, but they recruited him as a receiver. Like, is that a miss from State? You haven't seen any of the other high school recruits pan out. The transfers that have come in and been really successful are guys who have mostly been tied to Lebby. I don't really know with Kevin Coleman, was the lead recruiter there, but I know with Ant and Brennan, those are Lebby guys. So is the case of, the recruits you've had that have been successful are guys who are mostly tied to Lebby, and Bumphis's guys haven't panned out. I don't know, and I'm not saying one way or another because I don't know for sure. Now, that was the thing that's been presented, and somebody put the post on one of the boards, and it was, I guess the idea was if you look at the receivers Lebby has gotten us, and I don't know if this is actually the truth, but he talks about Kevin Coleman, Brendan Thompson, Anthony Evans, Aiden Williams, Grayson Harris, and those are Harris we haven't seen anything from, but it's like those guys have been the more successful players, whereas all these other receivers are bump recruits and didn't work out. I have no idea if that's legit or not. I have no idea what the percentage of Lebby recruiting a guy versus bump recruiting a guy was. But if you want to make an argument that to this point, State's only had a couple receivers truly break out and that they're guys that were mostly tied to Lebby, you can probably make that point. I do think State's going to have to go in the portal for receiver again this year, because you look at the guys they have on the roster and you don't know, do they have the guys ready to step in and really contribute? Because yes, you're getting Anthony Evans back, but after that, Aiden Williams, who is also, that one's kind of Lebby. Is Aiden Williams ready to be a true go-to player for you? Where's Frisco McGee at this point? Where's Ricky Johnson at this point in his career? So I do understand the perspective a little bit of, while State's had some really big hits at receiver, and that's not the position that's been a struggle for you, you possibly could be doing better. It's not like you're just loaded with great receivers top to bottom. And, if State lost its top couple of guys, how would they perform at receiver? That'd be questionable at this point. So I could see some recruiting concerns. Now, I still think he's done a pretty good job of going out and getting players overall, but I can see it a little bit. And let's be honest, if we removed some of the outside factors that are kind of clouding the vision, people would not be as upset about the move. People are mad for two big reasons. Number one is he is a Bulldog. He is one of our guys. He was a beloved player, was a great player here, and a guy that champions for Mississippi State, a guy that was so ecstatic to be able to come back and coach at his alma mater, and a guy that, I think we would all love to one day see be in an even bigger role at Mississippi State. And he is one of those guys. And this is not a Mississippi State thing. This is college football fans. You love having guys like that be a part of your program. It's good to have guys like that be a part of your program. And you never want to see those guys get shown the door. So, that's a big part of it. The other part is, of all, I kind of alluded to this earlier, of all the positions where you were expecting a change, this was not one of them. Because there's other coaches people are ready to see be gone. People want Corey Bell gone as corners coach. People want David Turner gone as defensive line coach. Some people want Lodeholt gone. Now, again, that one's not going to happen. But if there was a spot on offense, why did Mississippi State's offense suck this year? Primarily because the offensive line was bad. That was more than anything, because if State's offensive line was fine, we don't have some of the same concerns with Shapen that we did. The O-line was terrible. Now, do I think it's all on Loadholt? No, but if you're going to fire someone purely off the performance of their unit, like Loadholt would be the guy and not Bumphis when you talk about the offense. But there's like all these defensive staff changes that people have been wanting to see that are not happening. It's like, well, why is this getting out that we're moving on from Bumphis, but the other guys, we've not heard anything there. And with Corey Bell, like there's not been any sort of answer on what's happening there. David Turner, it's been pretty heavily alluded to, like he's not going to be a part of the program next year, or if he is, it's an off-field role. Nothing official. That's just where what everybody has been suggesting. But it's still one of those things, like people are wanting to see coaching changes. This was not one anybody was expecting. So like that adds into it as well. If you removed those factors, no, people are not as upset. And even if you just got rid of the fact that, like, hey, if this guy did not have Mississippi State ties, people are not nearly as frustrated with it. It would be kind of similar to last year getting rid of Cody Kennedy as O-line coach. Now, that's a little different because the O-line last year was not good, so you kind of understood the move more. But when people were upset with the move of Cody Kennedy last year, it wasn't really because they thought Cody Kennedy was a good coach. It was because they're like, you're getting rid of this guy on the offensive line, but the defense is crap. Like, why are you keeping all these why are you not getting rid of Coleman Hutzler? Why are you not getting rid of Corey Bell, David Turner, all these coaches that we don't think should be here? So those are like the big factors that lead into why it's a frustration. And the other part of it is, let's be honest, like I'm just going to be completely honest here, and I'll get into more of this here, but I don't think getting rid of Chad Bumphis is going to change Mississippi State's offense all that much. Like, I think you could have kept Mississippi State's offense, even if you want to tell me we could have been doing better at receiver. And look, I am definitely of the opinion that having the big-time receivers is a huge, huge thing for an offense. But even if you told me, hey, State could be better at receiver and they weren't doing enough under Bumphis, is getting a couple more receivers in what's going to be the difference in this offense actually getting all that much better? Or coaching them up a little bit better going to be the big difference? I think the big difference would come with fixing the O-line. Quarterback. Fixing that and getting better quarterback play, which, hey, that goes back on and Holisek. I don't know if the receiver position is what was causing any sort of problems. Like, you can tell me you weren't getting what you needed to in the recruiting trail, but at the end of the day, you were still getting production in that room. So why not have a guy on staff who plays the role that Bumphis does? That's where it's a big questionable. Because, like, there is value to having a guy like Bumphis on staff. And I put this out initially, like, you do need to first set aside the fact that when you're evaluating this decision, you do need to set aside the fact that he is a former Bulldog. Because, as I mentioned, that stuff does get overblown by fans. It's valuable, but if the job is not being done well, that doesn't matter. Like, to view Ole Miss, Matt Luke being a guy who would die for Ole Miss does not mean Matt Luke needs to be Ole Miss's football coach, right? And fans naturally just kind of want alums to be a part of the program. I've seen State fans have been listing off a lot of former Bulldogs who are coaching assistants now across college football. And I'm not saying I wouldn't bring any of those guys in, but I am like, I'm not going to bring those guys in over a guy who could do a better job, who is showing they are doing a better job. Like, make sure you're getting someone in who actually is doing the job well. Don't just hire someone because, well, they're an alum and they love Mississippi State. That said, there is value to having that. Like, having the guy on staff who has the connections across the state, who can tell guys about what it means to represent this program, who can relate to players about, like, going through it and being a part of Mississippi State football and making sure they fully understand it. Like, there's value there. You could make a case it's even more valuable now in an era where half these kids are not going to a school with the intention of, like, I'm there because I want to be a part of this program. They're going to a place for a paycheck. But it's the case for Mississippi State guys too. State has NIL. State's paying for players to come here. So you have to make sure those guys get it and understand what they're representing. Chad Bumphis, I think more than anybody else on that staff, is going to make sure they get it. Now, do I think The offensive staff, do I suddenly think that means they're going to have a hard time getting players without Bumphis? No. Like, you're going to be able to recruit offense as long as Lebby is here. Like, you're going to get solid quarterbacks. You're definitely going to get solid receivers. I think even without Bumphis, you will get receivers. You'll probably get some good running backs. O-line is the question right now. You got to get O-line figured out. Defense is where you got the harder sell right now. So if you wanted to say you wanted to have the former player guys on the defense, maybe you could make a case there. But regardless, like, there's value to having a guy like that on the staff. And as I mentioned earlier, Lebby has had the recruiter program guy be a part of his staff as a receivers coach previously at other stops. So despite what I was thinking might be a logical explanation, it has nothing to do with whether or not the guy knows the offense. Like that, he just wants someone in there who can get the players. I guess he clearly does not think Bumphis is getting the players to the level he needs. I don't know. It's a questionable move for sure. And like, this is going to be a risk, because if this doesn't work, it's going to be really bad for Lebby. We understand he's going into a hot seat year. Getting a Mayo Bowl invite does not change that. Winning the Mayo Bowl does not change that if they do win that. He's on a hot seat next season. He has to deliver, and probably has to deliver more than just going 6-6 and making a bowl. It probably needs to be a good season in Sarkville. I'm not saying if it's not 8-4, he's fired, but whatever record you get to, it better be something that along the way people are excited. And clearly he thinks he's going to do every possible move he can to maximize the program. And if he thinks we need to be upgrading our receiver room, okay. And that's where, I said I'm not going to challenge him. And Rufus Warren, former MSU tight end and O-lineman, was kind of going at me over that. Like, not going at me, but pointing out, like, he will definitely challenge Lebby on this, which it's fair. I'm just not going to challenge him over the idea that, like, hey, I get going into this next season, he clearly thinks he needs to make this be as good as he possibly can. And if they feel they can upgrade at receiver, okay. But it's a risk, because if it doesn't work, this is one of those moves that's going to turn the fan base against you. And I am not one to do the thing of, like, you've got to do the moves that appease to the fan base. I do think that gets overblown a little bit, of like making a hire or keeping a guy on staff just because fans like him. I'm not big on that, but I also understand that is part of the game in college football. And if you're already not popular and you're already someone who's being questioned, a move like this where you're getting rid of the most popular guy on your coaching staff and a guy that the whole fan base loves, if it doesn't work and you don't nail the hire and you don't get better at receiver, people are going to be really upset. And you're going to lose support quickly. So it's a massive risk. I mean, who are they going to turn to? I mean, the two names that have been coming up a lot are Derek Nix and Jacob Peeler. Nix, obviously, been in the state of Mississippi for a very long time, played at Southern Miss, coached at Southern Miss for years and years, then was at Ole Miss for a long, long time there, mostly as a running backs coach, but as I mentioned, spent a few years as a wide receivers coach there in Oxford with Ian Lane. Was at Auburn this past couple of years, working with Freeze, who obviously he worked with at Ole Miss for a long time. Big-time recruiter, gotten a lot of big-time talent within the state of Mississippi. And look, that's a guy that if you get him to Mississippi State and he can complete the trifecta of the FBS schools in Mississippi, that'd be a big-time hire of a guy who's done the job successfully before, a guy who's attracted a lot of big-time talent. The other name coming up a lot is Jacob Peeler from Missouri. This is a guy who, from Kosciuszko, is a Mississippi State grad and has a pretty impressive resume when it comes to the receivers that he's coached. You look at Missouri right now, and guys like Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Kevin Coleman, they've had really good receivers in Missouri since he has been there. He was at Ole Miss and was coaching guys like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. Now, he did not sign those guys. He was not on staff when those guys were there, but he did coach them. And he got guys like Elijah Moore to Oxford, and he signed good receivers to Ole Miss when he was there. So that's another guy who knows Mississippi and has recruited at a high level and has done it now at multiple SEC stops. If you get him in, that's another guy where it's like, okay, yeah, proven on the recruiting trail, proven production at the position. That'd be a big win. I don't know who you go after beyond those two. If you don't nail this hire, people are going to be pretty upset because it's going to feel like you just let a guy go for no good reason.